Lebanon's caretaker prime minister expresses hope that a ceasefire deal with Israel could be announced within days. Egypt's president and CIA director discussed recent joint efforts to achieve de-escalation in the Gaza Strip. And Israeli shelling kills at least 45 Palestinians and injures dozens in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. It's 8 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News. Let's start with the latest in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati has expressed hope that a ceasefire deal with Israel could be announced within days. Mikati noted that he initially believed a deal would not be possible until after Tuesday's U.S. presidential election. However, he grew more optimistic after discussions with U.S. envoy for the Middle East, Amos Hochstein, who is scheduled to travel to Israel today. Smoke rose in the southern Lebanese village of Kafr Killa after the Israeli occupation army blew up houses and targeted the nearby village of El Khiyam with incendiary ammunition. The occupation forces advanced operations overnight on the eastern outskirts of El Khiyam, carrying out a series of strikes using a range of weapons, including machine guns, artillery shells and airstrikes. Three people have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on the western Bekaa town of Sohmor. Additionally, one person was killed in an Israeli drone strike that targeted a motorcycle in Qara'un, also in the western Bekaa region of eastern Lebanon, according to local Lebanese media. Israeli warplanes have struck a house in the Baalbek town of Ain Burdai, killing at least 4 people. In a recent post on X, Israeli Army Arabic media spokesperson Avichai Adra'i issued an evacuation warning for residents of Baalbek, Ain Burdai and Doris, urging them to evacuate immediately. He claimed that these areas are located in a combat zone where Hezbollah's infrastructure, facilities and weaponry are targeted. In a key diplomatic effort, senior Biden administration advisors have visited Israel to address the escalating conflict, aiming to promote de-escalation and mitigate fears of a broader war in the region.
In a crucial diplomatic move, senior advisors from the Biden administration visited Israel to address the ongoing conflict in the region. According to reports from Axios, this visit aims to mitigate regional conflict and, in particular, fears of a broader war involving Lebanon and Hezbollah. The advisors are engaging in discussions with Israeli officials to advocate for de-escalation and to explore potential pathways for a ceasefire. The backdrop of this visit includes the dire humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where calls for increased aid and support are mounting amid the conflict. U.S. officials are emphasizing the importance of stabilizing the situation to prevent further regional instability. This visit underscores the Biden administration's commitment to balancing support for Israel's security with humanitarian considerations and the broader implications for Middle Eastern geopolitics. As the situation evolves, The effectiveness of these diplomatic efforts remains to be seen, but they signal a proactive approach by the US to engage in one of the most volatile conflicts in recent history.
For more analysis, we now go to Rana Al-Qassas in our newsroom. Over to you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Kareem. And for further analysis on the ceasefires, we're joined from Ramallah by Dr. Tamara Haddad, writer and political researcher. Welcome to Qnews. What are the main elements of the new proposal for a ceasefire in Lebanon?
Firstly, upon this time, there are some patterns and paths of the new draft that has different and several articles vis-à-vis the Lebanese draft or the 1707 UN General Assembly, but the visit focused on to Tel Aviv that never resulted in any positive outcomes, and I think that there are some additional conditions from Netanyahu that lead to reality, to put an international supervision plus the one that already in place in Lebanon, and should have the Lebanese army and putting away the army of Hezbollah politically and militarily, and to increase the number of the Lebanese army to reach 10,000 times of the Lebanese army with the coordination with the UNIFIL and the international monitoring in order to have an increase of a chance that is related to the dimension of using military force. Unless there is a consensus of the Lebanese government to be the first and sole responsible of entering the armies not to be used by any more fraction. And the Israeli situation would allow to Israel, if there is no ability of the Lebanese government to control the arms, so that would allow the two additions parties proposed by Netanyahu to have the freedom of the military and security measurements by Israel, and most importantly in Israel to control the sky atmosphere and to enter in order to minimize the dimension of transforming the arms from one zone to another. And the Israeli reality in the path of negotiations seems that wouldn't have a positive impact before the US election. That was similar of what's happening in Gaza Strip, and the Lebanese draft that has several challenges and hinders, despite that Mikati indicated yesterday.
Yesterday, Lebanese Prime Minister Mikati spoke optimistically of an imminent ceasefire deal in Lebanon. However, his words today were very much more gloomy in light of Israel's massive airstrikes on Tyre and Baalbek. Does this mean that chances of a ceasefire in the very near future are declining at this point?
Up till this now, there is no horizons of establishing this draft, and the strike of Baalbek has more than one target. The first one is killing the Shiite backup for Hezbollah that has several numbers of and the support of Hezbollah, so they're trying to put them away, and that's from one side. The second side is to use the military pressure to impose the status quo with pressuring Hezbollah to accept these conditions. The issue of Hezbollah that is rejecting these conditions without have a ceasefire, and then the negotiation. With respect to Mikati, he's optimistic, and there is some sort of consensus between Mikati and the other officials that was through the meeting of the Foreign Minister Blinken, and there is some sort of an acceptance by the Lebanese leader to have some sort of establishing the 1701 resolution and to have the army in Lebanon instead of Hezbollah and to monitor these sites. But the 2 points by Netanyahu, proposed by Mr. Netanyahu, that would hinder the agreement. I think there is some sort of not a full optimism, but Hezbollah is still negotiating with Berri, and it seems like there is some sort of coordination between Berri and Miqati based on the resolution of 1701. But for the Israelis, not only on the level that should be by the presence of the army in Lebanon, but the resolution indicated that there is a commitment between the two parties for Israel not to be enter in the future in the southern of Lebanon. I mean, to put them away or not to be allowed to enter this region.
Okay, will the United States mediators visiting the region at this hour be able to actually broker any deal, especially with reports claiming that Netanyahu would rather wait until after the results of the upcoming U.S. Presidential race are out before committing to any political process in Lebanon or Gaza? Your take, please.
My take it with respect to the Democratic parties represented by Biden means that should have a temporary truce or a settlement on the southern of Lebanon. But there is concern about the battle in the elections in America, specifically the current administration. But if Camilla, that should have some sort of an agreement, but now they are talking about the optimism and the positivity, whether they are on the levels of Hogestein or through the American media that would have some sort of a settlement in the near future, but on the reality that should know science of this settlement, but this is only just for the propaganda and the American public and reaching in the American pots. But I think that Netanyahu will hinder these paths that not give the way or pave the way for Camilla. Even if Trump wins, Netanyahu will be continue to be achieved as indicated in a few minutes. That there is no deadline for this war, but he needs only to achieve his own goals. One of them is to establish the long term in the southern Lebanon, or removing all the threats by Hezbollah and Hamas movement or the Palestinian resistance, even if leave it for 2 to 3 months, or if Trump wins, would lead the future of changing this strategy, but Netanyahu's strategy up till now through his term, whether is to Harris or Trump to win, so has a strategy of removing all the threats and killing and the arms and proxies of Iran, and to cooperate with Iran with respect to the nuclear program, and has his own strategy to deal in this formula, whether in the level.
Okay, Dr. Tamara Haddad, because I have to wrap up this segment. Finally, in 10 seconds, do you think that there is any internal pressure on Netanyahu to change his position on this issue as soon as possible?
If we talk in reality, up to this moment, Netanyahu knows very well that could have some movement by the families of the prisoners with respect to the hostages deals, but there is no real pressures either in Gaza or in the southern of Lebanon. The Israeli public is fully confident.
Okay, I'm very sorry, time is out from from Ramallah. That was Dr. Tamara Haddad, writer and political researcher. Thank you very much for your insights. Back again to you, Kareem.
Thank you very much, Rana. Spokesperson for the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, Andrea Tenetti, has reported that the peacekeeping mission experienced over 30 incidents involving Israel's occupation army, some of which were deemed deliberate. Tenetti affirmed that UNIFIL will remain in southern Lebanon to monitor the situation and report to the Security Council. He added that UNIFIL continues to urge de-escalation and adherence to Resolution 1701, emphasizing the need for action, not just words.
The death toll in Lebanon since October last year has reached over 2,007.
President of Cyprus, Nikos Christodoulidis, has expressed optimism that a ceasefire could be reached in Lebanon within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Christodoulidis made his remarks following a meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House, where they discussed the situations in Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine and Cyprus. The Cyprus leader noted that he has recently held discussions with the leaders of Egypt, Jordan and Lebanon regarding a potential ceasefire in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hezbollah.
So, Mr. President, Cyprus made all this possible. I want to thank you.
Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and CIA Director William Burns have discussed recent joint efforts to achieve de-escalation in the Gaza Strip and the urgent provision of humanitarian aid. During their meeting, President el-Sisi emphasized the critical need for a ceasefire in Lebanon to preserve its sovereignty and protect its citizens' security. He also warned about the dangers of continued regional escalation and its serious implications for the area. At least 45 Palestinians have been killed and dozens injured in Israeli shelling on Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. Palestinian media reported that Israeli artillery targeted several homes in the town overnight, resulting in extensive casualties. Israeli warplanes have bombed the third floor of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza. The strike ignited a warehouse storing medicine and medical supplies received just 5 days ago from the World Health Organization. Medical sources reported that all surgical services at the hospital have been suspended due to the ongoing attacks. Three Palestinians, including a child, have been killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Nur Shams camp in Tul Karam. Local Palestinian media have reported that numerous Israeli military vehicles, accompanied by 3 bulldozers, entered from the west, moving through Tul Karam camp towards Nur Shams. The incursion imposed a tight siege, damaging infrastructure, shop entrances, and destroying water and electricity lines, resulting in widespread outages. Let's take a deeper look at the developments in Africa with Mona Al-Mislhi in our newsroom. Over to you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Kareem. And now we move to the latest developments in Africa. Egypt has condemned the rapid support attacks in Sudan's eastern Al Jazeera state and expressed deep concern over the unfolding events. In a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Egypt reiterated its call for an immediate ceasefire and the implementation of the principles of the Jeddah Declaration to safeguard the capabilities of the Sudanese people, enabling a serious humanitarian response from the international community. Egypt also expressed hope for a comprehensive political solution that meets the aspirations of the Sudanese people. Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Egyptian expatriates, Badr Abdulati, has arrived in Uganda for a bilateral visit. Abdulati is set to deliver a message from President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni. He will also hold meetings with Ugandan business leaders and representatives of the Egyptian community in Uganda. Chinese Vice President Han Jing has met with Zambian National Assembly Speaker Nili Muti in Beijing. Han emphasized the importance of implementing the outcome from the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit and enhancing cooperation and collaboration in trade, investment, infrastructure, construction and healthcare with the aim of improving mutual understandings between the two countries.
以两国元首重要共识为引领，在涉及彼此核心利益和重大关切问题上坚定相互支持，落实好中非合作论坛北京峰会成果，在贸易投资、基础设施建设、医疗卫生等各领域提升合作水平，增进相知相亲，推动构建更加。
UN food agencies have released a report warning of severe food crisis threatening hundreds of thousands of people in various areas, including Sudan, Haiti, Mali, and Palestine. This report stated that these populations either face famine or are near a famine, adding that conflicts, economic instability, and climate shocks, combined with reduced funding for emergency food and agriculture assistance, are driving alarming levels of acute food insecurity. Well, that's all for our African news. Now back to you, Karim.
Thank you very much, Mona. The Kremlin has stated that Ukraine's leadership appeared increasingly nervous about Russian advances along the front line, noting Kiev's recent request for long-range Tomahawk missiles from the US. Tomahawk missiles have a range of 2,500 kilometers, significantly farther than any missile currently in Ukraine's arsenal. Russia indicated that such a delivery would be viewed as an escalation in the ongoing conflict. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has strongly suggested that Kiev has requested supplies of long-range U.S. Tomahawk missiles, and he traveled to the U.S. last month to pitch a victory plan to President Joe Biden, which he said could help pressure Moscow to negotiate an end to the war in good faith. Ukraine has received only 10% of U.S. military aid approved by Congress earlier this year, President Zelensky said.
Between Ukraine and the White House.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says that North Korea's deployment to Russia has the potential to lengthen the conflict and draw in additional actors. Austin said that roughly 10,000 North Korean forces were already deployed to eastern Russia, in what he added increasingly looked like a deployment to support Russia's combat operations in Kursk region near the border with Ukraine.
With our allies and partners,
Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia has told the Security Council that Russia's military interaction with North Korea does not violate international law. Nebenzia also said that Russian interaction with North Korea in the military and other areas is in line with international law and is not aimed against global South countries. The US and South Korean air forces have conducted joint aerial drills in response to North Korea's recent missile launch. North Korea claimed that it had tested an upgraded intercontinental ballistic missile, calling it the world's most powerful strategic weapon. Footage from South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff shows South Korea and US F-16 and KF-16 fighter jets flying in formation. Thursday's launch marked North Korea's longest ballistic missile test to date, with a reported flight time of 87 minutes, according to South Korean officials. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian has stated that China is closely monitoring developments following North Korea's recent intercontinental missile test. At a routine press briefing, he emphasized that maintaining peace and stability on the Korean peninsula remains China's priority. Global shares slid amid warnings of accelerating costs for artificial intelligence, and key U.S. economic data was released earlier today. In midday trading in the U.S., the S&P 500 was down 1.6%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 1%, while the Nasdaq Composite traded 2.4% lower. In Europe, France's CAC 40 slipped 1.2% and Germany's DAX fell 1.05%. Britain's FTSE 100 declined 0.71%. At the end of the Asian market trading, Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 declined 0.5% and Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost 0.3%, while the Shanghai Composite added 0.4%. In commodities, oil prices increased 1% after rallying the previous day on stronger than expected U.S. fuel demand and reports that producer group OPEC Plus could delay a planned output increase. Brent crude futures rose 1% to $73.30 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude were up by 1.3% at $69.52. Gold prices eased as U.S. presidential election race sparked safe haven demand and the release of key U.S. inflation data. Spot gold was down 0.7% at $2,766.59 after hitting a record high of $2,790.15 earlier in the session. U.S. gold futures dipped to 0.8% to $777.20. U.S. consumer spending increased slightly more than expected in September, putting it and the economy on a higher growth trajectory in the final 3 months of the year. Data from the Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis reported that consumer spending rose 0.5% last month after an upwardly revised 0.3% gain in August. Consumer spending accounts for more than 2/3 of U.S. economic activity. Moving to Asia, the Bank of Japan has opted to keep its short-term interest rates target unchanged at 0.25% following the conclusion of its 2-day monetary policy review. The bank suggested that improving conditions, particularly in the U.S. economy, may enable future rate increases. The central bank projected Japan's inflation will hover around its 2% target in the coming years, reinforcing its stance to gradually tighten borrowing costs as long as the economy shows steady recovery. The BOJ lowered its core inflation forecast for 2025 to 1.9%, but kept its 2026 outlook steady. In the MENA region, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, said that the growth in the Middle East and North Africa region is expected to rebound to 4% next year. According to the IMF's latest regional economic outlook, growth in the region will remain sluggish at 2.1% in 2024, lower than earlier projections as geopolitical and macroeconomic factors weigh. Growth in the Caucasus and the Central Asia is projected to remain strong at 4.5% in 2025. And the IMF warned that the outlook for the entire region, including the Caucasus and the Central Asia, carries significant downside risks. It emphasized the need to accelerate structural reforms, particularly in governance and labor markets, to enhance medium-term growth prospects. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Lebanon's caretaker prime minister expresses hope that a ceasefire deal with Israel could be announced within days. Egypt's president and CIA director discussed recent joint efforts to achieve de-escalation in the Gaza Strip. An Israeli shelling kills at least 45 Palestinians and injures dozens in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. And that's it for this news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. For real-time updates, connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thanks for watching. I'm Karim Hatem. Stay tuned for more.